Ancient Egyptian wall paintings provide a fascinating glimpse into the past. In tombs, it was the painter's task to preserve the dead individual's spirit. Most tomb art generally followed consistent rules and held special meaning to the ancient Egyptians. The front and profile viewpoints depicted in a single human figure are one of the most characteristic features of Egyptian art. This is reminiscent of the fact that the ancient Egyptians saw the world in terms of dualities, life and death, flood and drought, good and bad. These composite images of the most recognizable parts of the human body were more detailed than a realistic pose and assisted the tomb owner's spirit, to recognize its body. Perspective and the status of figures were shown in a system of strips that looks much like a series of comics or a graphic novel. The use of perspective with a vanishing point was not used in Egyptian art. The lower border of the register was the ground line, and depth was shown by the overlapping of figures or by figures stacked one above the other. The size of a figure indicated its relative importance in the image. Kings were portrayed larger than life to symbolize their godlike powers. Tomb owners, as the most important subject of the design, were also depicted on a grand scale. In contrast, wives and children, servants and animals were drawn smaller, indicating their lesser importance. Creating exact replicas of figures was critical. One way of ensuring correct proportion was to use a grid system, a set of vertical and horizontal lines painted onto the bare wall. This system allowed the initial draftsman to faithfully copy and enlarge a design also overlaid with a grid. Cords soaked in red ink were stretched out between two pieces of wood and then snapped against the wall to create perfectly straight lines. These lines are sometimes still visible on unfinished walls. The ancient Egyptians used color not only for its aesthetic appeal but also for its perceived meaning. Both warm and cool colors were used, offering depth and interest to their art as well as signs to their gods. The Egyptians believed that certain colors were not merely symbolic of but were imbued with specific powers or attributes that were linked to various gods. As a result, great power could be contained within an object if it was made or painted in meaningful colors. The pigments used to make various colors consisted mainly of minerals that occur naturally in Egypt and surrounding areas. Minerals were ground up in a stone mortar and mixed in pots with water and an adhesive such as wood gum or egg white. Paint made in this way was called tempera. White was made from calcium carbonate, lime, or calcium sulfate, gypsum, and equaled purity. Calcite, also called Egyptian alabaster, was also used. Yellow was made from ochre while a bright, golden yellow was made from orpiment. Pale yellow was made from jarosite. Yellow was used to depict female flesh while golden yellow and gold itself was used to represent the sun and flesh of gods, particularly Re the sun god. Gold was considered a divine metal because it never tarnished. Silver was very rare in Egypt, it could be even more precious than gold. It was thought to be what the gods' bones were made from. Blue was made with azurite, copper carbonate, and represented the heavens, vegetation, youth, water and the Nile River. The color known as Egyptian blue was made from heating quartz, ground malachite and calcium carbonate together. The finer the grain, the paler the blue. Green was created with copper or by grinding up malachite and stood for Osiris, eternal life, prosperity and resurrection. It also represented regeneration and fertility, so this color was sacred to the goddess Hathor and was used to depict the flesh of Nephthys, the goddess of rebirth. Red was made with ochre, just like yellow. Ochre gives a range of colors from yellow to red to dark brown, depending on the amount of water used. Iron oxide was also often used. During the New Kingdom, realgar was used for red but it fades to yellow over time. Red was used to paint male skin tones. It also represented the sun, evil, power, blood and life force. Black was made from soot or charcoal and signified Egypt's ancient name Kemet or black land and the silt-fed soil around the Nile. Black was also used to denote the underworld and Osiris. Ancient Egyptian civilization is regarded as the most conservative and rigid ever. The basic patterns of Egyptian institutions, beliefs and artistic ideas were formed during the first few centuries and didn't change, reoccurring till the very end. The knowledge of Egyptian civilization rests majorly on the tombs and their contents. The Egyptian concept was that each person should equip himself well for a happy afterlife, which leads to the vast repertoire of grave goods and myriad tomb paintings in the pyramids. An early development of tomb art can be seen in a fragment of the wall painting from Myrianopolis, with standardized human and animal figures and large white boats. The Old Kingdom developed much further in this field in trying to create a replica of the daily life of a living man for his soul Ka. The hippopotamus hunt at the tomb of Tutankhamun is a perfect example because of its landscape setting. The representation of the deceased on all tomb paintings of the Old Kingdom was passive and static, as an onlooker of all the action around him. It might be a subtle way of conveying the death of the human body but the continuation of the living soul. During the Middle Kingdom, a loosening of the established norms can be observed in the tomb paintings of the princes of Beni Hasan, carved in the rock. A good example is the mural feeding the oryxes from the rock-cut tomb of Imhotep, where the painter has experimented with foreshortening and spatial effects. The best of all tomb paintings are derived from the New Kingdom. The formulas of projecting an image onto a flat surface continued, but there is more naturalism in the figures. The figure of the deceased is not static anymore but involved in the whole action, and he is also brought down in scale. There is relaxation of the stiff rules of representation and the set themes once thought appropriate for tomb paintings. King Akhenaten, along with starting a new faith based on Aton, gave a new direction to artistic activity. There was a temporary relaxation of the Egyptian preoccupation with life in the hereafter, and greater concern with life on earth. There grew a different, more naturalistic way of representing the human figure. The survival of the Amarna Style, as this art was called, is seen in the Tomb of Tutankhamun. The paintings on the panels of a golden chest portray the king's mission to define himself as the imperial conqueror. The chest depicts the king as a hunter and a warrior, a double proclamation of his royal power. Although by Tutankhamun's times, the Amarna style had almost vanished, some lingering features were still practiced, but the pharaohs after Akhenaten re-established the cult of Amen, and returned to the old manner of art. Illustrated papyrus scrolls became the essential equipment of all well-to-do tombs. The scroll of Hunefer in the Theban necropolis is an excellent example that represents the final judgment of the deceased.